Learn the unsettling reality about banshees. Overview. The Unknown's Call. One of Ireland's most terrifying legends is the banshee's eerie cries. Do the stories that have been passed down through the years include truth, or are they just a story whispered by the firelight? We delve into the spooky past of the banshee tonight, revealing first-hand stories and delving into the meaning behind her melancholy cries. The Kilkenny Woman Who Wept. Fiona McCarthy was a young widow who lived on the outskirts of Kilkenny in the late autumn of 1901. She lived a lonely life, spending her days caring for her sheep and lamenting the death of her husband, who had perished in a terrible accident the year before. Fiona was sitting by her hearth one chilly night when a startling sound disturbed the quiet. Through the crevices of her tiny home, the wind began to carry a faint, melancholy murmur. She initially brushed it off. She was often misled by the wind, which roared across the hills like a ghost. However, the sound intensified and changed into a high-pitched scream that appeared to originate from beyond her door. Under the table, Fiona's devoted collie, Rua, started to whine and pull away. Her neck's hair stood on end. "Who is present?" Fiona grabbed a poker from the fireplace and called. There was simply the constant keening, a sound that rang in her soul, and no response. She opened the door to face the source, unable to ignore it. She was paralyzed by what she saw. A woman stood behind a twisted oak tree, her hair glistening in the moonlight like silver strands. She carried a little bone comb in her hand and was dressed in a frayed gray shawl. The woman's eyes were sparkling with tears, and her face was a mask of grief. She cried out in such sorrow that Fiona felt her knees give way as their eyes locked. The figure vanished into the fog in a moment. The morning after, the omen completed, with Rua by her side, Fiona snuggled by the fire for the remainder of the night, terrified and scared. It was a dream, she tried to convince herself, a fabrication of her imagination. But she knew better in her heart. When dawn broke over the hills the next morning, a neighbor came bearing bad news. Cillian, Fiona's older brother, had died during the night when he was sleeping. Fiona's heart sinks. Although she had heard the banshee stories, she had never given them any credence. She was now a living example of their veracity. A banshee. What is it? An historical viewpoint. One of Ireland's oldest and most persistent myths is the banshee, also known as banshee. She is associated with the ancient Aos Sea, supernatural creatures that were previously feared and venerated in Irish legend, as her name means woman of the fairy mound. The banshee is a lone figure, in contrast to other fairies. She doesn't play naughty tricks or dance in circles. Rather, she is a death harbinger, alerting the living with her keening scream. According to historical accounts, the banshee was associated with aristocratic Irish families like the McCarthys, O'Neills, and O'Briens. Every family thought their own banshee would be saddened by their passing. She was perceived as a dreadful reaper by some, and as a guardian ghost by others. The banshee is described in different ways. According to others, she looks like a young maiden with glowing beauty, her hair shining in the moonlight. Others characterize her as an elderly crone with empty eyes and a wrinkled face. No matter what shape she takes, her cry is always the same, a shivering shriek that pierces the darkness like a dagger. The banshee and the keening tradition. A connection, the old Irish custom of Cailnead, or keening, is where the banshee's cry originates. At funerals, professional mourners, who were frequently women, would weep and lead the deceased spirits to the afterlife. It was believed that their cries would facilitate their passage from this world to the next. What occurs, though, if there isn't a mourner? This is what some believe the banshee does, keening for those who have no mourning. According to some, she is the ghost of a keener who accepted payment for her services and was condemned to roam the world forever. Contemporary meetings, the Donegal case. A family in rural Donegal described a terrifying incident in 2016. They heard an odd noise outside their farmhouse late one night. It started as a faint groan and grew louder until it was a wail. The family thought it was an animal, maybe an owl or a fox. However, they noticed a dark figure standing at the edge of their land when they went outside to look into it. According to one family member, she was just standing there. Despite the lack of wind, her hair was blowing. Then she let forth a terrible, shrill scream. It seemed to be inside your head. Before their sight, the figure disappeared. Their granddad unexpectedly died 3 days later. Justifications, myth or fact? Justifications, myth or fact? The banshee is merely a combination of imagination and folklore, according to skeptics. They ascribe her cry to natural noises, like a vixen's scream or a barn owl's call. Others contend that sightings of the banshee are psychological in nature, based on the power of suggestion. People's thoughts may build up images of what they expect to see. However, no explanation can take away the memory of her somber wail for those who have met her. The final cry, a terrifying caution. There is a tale about a young man named Sean that is frequently spoken around Galway's pubs. As a skeptic, Sean dismissed the banshee stories as superstitious rubbish. He heard a sound he had never heard before one evening while making his way home from a late party. It began as a gentle keening and grew into an ear-splitting shriek. As he turned a corner, Sean noticed her, but he brushed it off as the wind. Her long hair whipped about her face as she stood in the center of the road. Her eyes were sad as she pointed at him. Sean's heart was racing as he hurried home. He dismissed the meeting as a drunken delusion and kept it to himself. However, his best friend died in an accident 3 days later. The legend never made Sean laugh again. The haunting truth in conclusion. Her legend lives on, haunting Ireland's hills and valleys, whether or not you believe in the banshee. She represents loss, pain, and the enigmas of life and death. She is more than just a ghost story. Keep the banshee in mind the next time you hear a cry in the wind. Maybe she's simply a story, or maybe she's out there, waiting, watching, grieving for the lives that haven't been lost yet.